Anxiety seems to be a growing problem in children. Let's look now at the different ways in which anxiety can present, some of the common anxiety disorders in children, and when to seek help. Thanks everyone for joining me on the mat today. I'm Dr. Kayleen Henderson. I'm a child psychiatrist, mother of 3 and founder of A Dose of Awesomeness. Today we're going to be talking about anxiety because it seems to be a growing issue for our children. And there are probably a number of reasons why this is. One of the reasons I wonder about is whether it relates to the relative lack of freedom that our kids experience these days. I'm sure, like me, many of you had fairly free roaming childhoods where you had free range of the neighbourhood for many days at a time during your school holidays, for example. The world is a different place than it used to be, and obviously that's not necessarily possible or practical that we will ever get back to that point with our children, and that's not a bad thing. Our kids are growing up in a time where there's other benefits that they'll experience that we didn't have the chance to experience. But I think part of that is the loss of the inherent messaging in that freedom, which was that the world was a mostly safe place and that we were capable and competent of looking after ourselves and tackling tricky situations. So I do wonder whether that relative lack of freedom that our children experience has a role to play as a result of that lack of messaging these days. I also wonder whether the relative lack of downtime that our kids experience plays a role. Downtime is really important for our kids just as it is for us. It helps our children to have their physiological systems sort of restored to a healthy baseline. But these days, children are often overscheduled. And I understand that as a parent myself. I understand that we often want our children to be great at sport or music or art or whatever it might be, but our kids need downtime, and they're at risk of burnout if we don't provide that. These days, children too often have what might have otherwise been downtime filled with screen time, which again deprives children of that opportunity to have their physiological systems restored to that healthy baseline. And I think that does have a role to play. And similarly, I think we as parents also have the same difficulties. We as parents have less downtime than our predecessors. We tend to be more stressed, more distracted, more engaged with social media updates through the evening or responding to work emails at night, where these weren't problems that our parents faced. And I think because we tend to be more stressed and distracted as a generation of parents, this can really set the tone for our families. And I certainly wonder whether that has a role to play as well. And finally, I think it's a good thing that we're more aware of anxiety in our children, and that may well be one of the reasons why we're picking it up more in our children, simply because we have a greater awareness that it exists in children. So there are children that may have had anxiety go unrecognised in the past, whereas that might not be the case now, and that's certainly a good thing because we know that early help is beneficial for children. I'm often asked by parents about when anxiety becomes a problem, so when to worry about their children's worry. And when I think about anxiety, I often think about an iceberg broken into 3 sections. So as we go further up the iceberg, the number of children go down as the severity of their anxiety increases. So looking at those 3 parts, at the base of the iceberg we have all children. All children will experience anxiety from time to time, just as all adults do. It's a universal human experience. The themes about which they become anxious will obviously vary depending on the child's age and circumstances. So particularly young ones will often worry about being away from us, particularly if they're starting in childcare settings for the first time. As children get older and are exposed to a broader range of experiences, the themes about which they can become anxious becomes broader too. So they might become anxious about school camps or performances, exams or friendship situations. In the middle section of the iceberg, which is smaller, there will be fewer children who are affected by more problematic anxiety. Now this anxiety is more problematic because it either occurs in the wrong amounts or in the wrong situations. And we'll go on to talk about that in a little bit more detail soon. But essentially this type of more problematic anxiety can create greater stress, greater upsets, and the tendency for children to try to avoid various situations. At the tip of the iceberg we have those few children, the minority of children who experience anxiety quite severely. And what we see in children is that this tends to fall into definable categories that we know clinically as anxiety disorders. Now, there are a few of these that do occur commonly in children, so I'll just run through these briefly so that parents and educators have an idea about what to look for in children. Firstly, separation anxiety disorder. Now, this differs from normal separation anxiety that young children experience. It tends to occur later, affecting commonly, say, 7 to 8-year-olds, tends to be a lot more intense, and certainly tends to impair children's functioning. Now, the theme, obviously, is the fear of being separated from one's parents or caregiver. So children who experience separation anxiety can follow their parents around the house, they can be reluctant to sleep in their own bed at night, and they can have nightmares about being permanently separated from a parent. So, for example, nightmares about kidnappings or car accidents or things like that that will permanently separate them from their parent or caregiver. Often children with separation anxiety disorder also experience physical ailments as part of their anxiety. So they might complain of headaches or tummy aches or not feeling like eating, things like that, which affect them physically as well. Secondly, we have children with a specific phobia. Now, these are specific objects or situations that are particularly terrifying to children, despite the fact that they pose no real or very little threat. So things like a fear of dogs would be quite common in children, or a fear of thunderstorms, or fear of vomiting, things like that that relate to a specific instance. Now, in contrast, some children have what we call generalised anxiety disorder. These children worry about anything and everything, from friendship situations to tragic world events and everything in between. Now, these children often complain of physical symptoms as well. They're often worried day in, day out, and often complain of physical upsets that go along with that as well. There's another type of anxiety disorder that's really helpful to know about in children because it's often misportrayed in the media, and that's obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. Now, obsessive compulsive disorder is made up of two parts. Firstly, the obsessions, and secondly, the compulsions. Now, the obsessions are random, intrusive thoughts that are very unlike what you would otherwise be thinking, that can pop into your head at random times and be really distressing. So examples for children are that they've said a bad word, or that they've done the wrong thing, or even that the house is on fire, or that a loved one is going to die. Now, obviously, these thoughts are really upsetting for children, which is where the compulsions come in. And compulsions are behaviours or rituals that children feel compelled to do in order to neutralise that upsetting thought. So things like tapping or checking things, moving their body in a particular way, counting, and other rituals that children might experience. Now, the really upsetting thing about OCD is that the average time from symptoms to presentation is 7 years. And no one should ever have to struggle or suffer with a condition that's treatable for 7 years or any length of time. So I mention it because if parents or educators know of a child who's experiencing that, it's really important that they seek help and seek help early. The other really common anxiety disorder that occurs in children is social anxiety disorder. And these are situations in which children find themselves to be the centre of attention. So either in social situations or performance situations in which they fear that they will either embarrass themselves or be judged harshly in some way. And this does occur in young children, albeit increasing as children get older. Now, there are other anxiety disorders that occur in children too, PTSD and panic disorder, although it's helpful to have an understanding of which ones occur most commonly in early childhood. Now, the threshold which is required to be met before these are considered an anxiety disorder, is when the level of anxiety either causes clinically significant distress or impairs a child's functioning. So they're the two criteria for being an anxiety disorder. But there's no reason for parents to wait until that threshold is met before they take a child to seek help. Anxiety management skills are best learnt by all children. We all experience anxiety from time to time, and this starts in childhood. So it makes sense to me that we would teach children these skills as early as possible. I'm often asked, when is the best time for parents to seek professional help? And really the answer to that is whenever a parent feels they need to. If a parent doesn't feel equipped for whatever reason to help guide children through those situations or to help manage their anxiety effectively, for whatever reason, it makes sense to seek help from a professional who can help them. And there's loads of professionals who would be willing and able to help children and their families, myself included. There are lots of face-to-face and online resources which are really helpful for parents when teaching them how to guide their children through various situations that they might find anxiety-provoking, my own included. Sometimes I meet with parents who are worried about taking their child to see someone professionally for anxiety or for any other reason, but they needn't be worried. I always think if we teach kids to seek help when they're finding life to be overwhelming, that's actually a really healthy message that they can then take through life, and particularly as they get through those more difficult teenage years and years in young adulthood, it's a really healthy thing to know that you can go and reach out for help if you're feeling overwhelmed. When we teach children stress management skills and anxiety management strategies, we're teaching them strategies that they can carry with them through life. And I always think, why wouldn't you want to give kids a head start on learning strategies that set them up for success not only in childhood, but all throughout their adult lives? I think in those situations where they've become a bit of a habit and heels have been dug in and it feels hard to break those habits, one of the most helpful things I've found with children is to really make sure you align with your child against the problem. So what you don't want to do is to line yourself up against your child, because then you have those power struggles that never go well for anyone. So in those situations,